The spaceport terminal buzzed with activity as hundreds of travelers moved through the massive building. Jake Morrison stood near Gate 7, his hand resting casually on his belt as he watched the crowd. After 6 years as a Marine and 3 more as a security contractor, reading crowds had become second nature to him. He could spot trouble before it started, usually. The afternoon shift was almost over. In 20 minutes, Jake would clock out and head home to his small apartment in the workers' district. Maybe he would grab some real food instead of another protein pack. His paycheck had finally cleared, and he felt like treating himself. The Veyrath diplomatic shuttle had landed an hour ago. Jake had watched the tall, scaled aliens walk through the terminal with their usual grace. Most humans still stared at them, even though first contact had happened 15 years ago. The Veyrath were impressive, standing over 7 feet tall with amber eyes that seemed to glow in certain light. Their scaled skin shifted between blue and green depending on their mood. A small Veyrath child walked beside a tall guardian, her tiny hand wrapped around his larger one. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old by human standards. Her scales were lighter than the adults, almost silver in the terminal lights. She carried a small bag shaped like some alien animal Jake didn't recognize. Something felt wrong. Jake's instincts kicked in before his mind caught up. 3 men in the crowd were moving with purpose, their hands reaching inside their jackets. Their eyes were locked on the Veyrath travelers near Gate 9. Time seemed to slow down. Jake's muscles tensed as he started moving toward the threat. His mouth opened to shout a warning, but the words never came out. Gunfire erupted across the terminal. People screamed and scattered in every direction. The sharp crack of rifles echoed off the metal walls and high ceilings. Jake saw the Veyrath guardian stumble and fall, blood spreading across his chest. The small child stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, her silver scales turning dark gray with fear. Jake ran. His body moved on pure instinct, the same training that had kept him alive in 3 combat zones taking over. Bullets tore through the air around him. He saw other aliens falling, saw human travelers diving for cover, saw security personnel trying to return fire. The child stood perfectly still, too terrified to move. Her large amber eyes were wide with shock. She didn't understand what was happening. She was just a little girl on a trip with her guardian. Jake reached her in seconds, though it felt like hours. He didn't think about the danger. He didn't consider the bullets or the armed men or the fact that he might die. He just grabbed the child and pulled her down, covering her small body with his own. The impact of the first bullet felt like someone had hit him with a hammer. It slammed into his left shoulder, spinning him slightly. He gritted his teeth and held tight to the child, making sure she stayed covered. The second bullet hit his right shoulder. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and overwhelming. His arms weakened, but he locked them in place through sheer will. The child was crying now, making high-pitched sounds that cut through the gunfire. The third bullet hit his left leg. Jake's vision blurred. He could feel the child's small body shaking beneath him, could feel her rapid heartbeat against his chest. She was alive. That was all that mattered. The gunfire seemed to go on forever. Jake heard shouting, heard more shots, heard the heavy footsteps of security personnel in combat gear. His own heartbeat thundered in his ears, mixing with the sound of the child's frightened cries. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Jake tried to lift his head, but his body wouldn't respond. The pain was massive, consuming everything. He could feel blood soaking through his uniform, warm and sticky. His vision darkened around the edges. Hands grabbed him, pulling him up. He tried to fight, tried to keep protecting the child, but his strength was gone. Someone was talking to him, but the words sounded far away and distorted. "The child," Jake managed to whisper. "Is she safe?" He thought he heard someone answer, but he couldn't be sure. The darkness was closing in fast, pulling him down into its depths. The last thing he saw was the small Veyrath girl being carried away by a medic, her silver scales stained with his blood. She was alive. Jake let the darkness take him. He woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. The room was white and sterile, filled with the steady beep of medical equipment. His entire body felt like it was on fire. Every small movement sent waves of pain through his shoulders and leg. A nurse came in when she heard him stirring. She was young, maybe 25, with tired eyes that had seen too many casualties. "Welcome back," she said, checking his vital signs. "You had us worried for a while." "The child," Jake croaked. His throat was dry and raw. "The Verath child." The nurse smiled. "She's fine. Not a scratch on her. You saved her life." Relief flooded through Jake, stronger than any painkiller. He closed his eyes and took a shaky breath. "The others?" he asked. The nurse's smile faded. 12 dead, including the child's guardian. 23 wounded. The attackers were killed by security forces. Jake nodded slowly, processing the information. 12 people dead because of hatred and fear. But one small child was alive. The nurse gave him more painkillers and left him to rest. Over the next few days, Jake learned more about what had happened. A human supremacist group had attacked the terminal, targeting alien travelers. It had been planned for weeks. Local authorities called Jake a hero. A few news outlets ran stories about the security guard who had saved an alien child. But the attention faded quickly, as it always did. People moved on to the next story, the next crisis. Jake received a formal message from the Verath embassy 6 days after the attack. It was short and polite, thanking him for his service and wishing him a full recovery. Nothing more. He didn't expect anything more. Jake focused on his recovery, working through painful physical therapy sessions and trying to deal with nightmares that woke him up every night. The doctors said he might never regain full use of his left shoulder. His security career was probably over. He tried not to think about the future, about the medical bills piling up or the fact that his employer had offered minimal compensation. He just took things one day at a time, grateful to be alive. On the 6th day after his release from the hospital, everything changed. Jake had just finished his morning coffee when he heard the sirens. Living in the workers' district meant constant noise, but this was different. These sirens were the kind that meant something serious was happening. He limped to his window and looked out at the street below. People were pointing up at the sky. Jake pressed his face against the glass and looked up. Ships hung in the atmosphere above the city. Not human ships. These were massive vessels with designs unlike anything in the human fleet. Their hulls were dark blue and silver, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow like water. Jake had seen pictures of Verath warships before, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. His communicator buzzed. It was his neighbor, an older woman named Betty who lived across the hall. "Jake, are you seeing this? They're saying it's the Verath military. Why would they bring warships here?" Jake had no answer. He ended the call and turned on his screen, flipping through news channels. Every station was covering the same story. The Verath Third Fleet had entered orbit around Theta 7 without warning. Diplomatic channels were going crazy. The colonial government was in emergency session. Someone knocked on Jake's door. He grabbed his cane and made his way across the small apartment. His legs still hurt badly, and he couldn't move without support. He checked the peephole and froze. 2 figures stood in the hallway. They wore armor that looked like it was made from scales, dark blue and silver to match their ships. They were tall, well over 7 feet, with weapons holstered at their sides. Verath warriors. Jake's heart raced. He opened the door slowly, gripping his cane tight. "Jake Morrison?" one of them asked. His English was heavily accented but clear. His amber eyes fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him want to step back. "Yes," Jake managed. "What's this about?" "I am Commander Velis of House Celera. We need to speak with you. May we enter?" It didn't really sound like a question. Jake stepped aside and let them in. They had to duck to fit through his doorway. Standing in his tiny apartment, they seemed even more imposing. "What's going on?" Jake asked. "Why is the fleet here?" Velis looked around the apartment, taking in the single room, the basic furniture, the medical supplies scattered on the counter. His expression was hard to read. "You saved a child 6 days ago," Velis said. "A Verath child at the spaceport." "I did," Jake confirmed. "She was in danger. I just reacted." "The child's name is Nira," Velis continued. "She is the daughter of High Matriarch Celera, Supreme Commander of the Third Fleet and member of our ruling council. Jake felt the blood drain from his face. He had saved the daughter of one of the most powerful aliens in known space. No wonder the embassy message had been so formal. "I didn't know," Jake said quietly. "It wouldn't have mattered anyway. She was a child in danger." Veles studied him for a long moment. "That is precisely why we are here. You acted without knowing her identity. You sacrificed your own body to protect her. You shed blood for a child not of your species. This is what we call Kelshera, the warrior's heart." The other Veyrath warrior spoke for the first time. "In our culture, such an act creates a debt that cannot be repaid with simple gratitude or money." "I don't want anything," Jake said quickly. "I'm just glad she's safe." "You do not understand," Veles said. "The debt exists whether you seek payment or not. High Matriarch Celera has invoked the ancient right of Kethera, the blood bond. You are now claimed by House Celera." Jake sat down heavily on his couch. "What does that mean?" Veles moved closer. "It means you are under our protection. It means your life is now tied to our house. It means the matriarch herself is coming to Earth to formally acknowledge the debt." "I don't understand any of this," Jake said, rubbing his face. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the second warrior said firmly. "Most would not. Most humans run from danger. You ran toward it. You placed yourself between bullets and a child. You took 3 shots meant for her. This is not common behavior." Veles knelt down so he was at eye level with Jake. It was a strange sight, seeing such a powerful being lower himself. "Listen to me, Jake Morrison. What happened at that spaceport changed your life in ways you do not yet understand. The matriarch is coming. She will offer you honor beyond anything you have known. But I must be honest with you. Refusing her would be seen as a grave insult. It could damage relations between our peoples. So I don't have a choice." Jake asked. "You always have a choice," Veles said. "But choices have consequences. The matriarch arrives tomorrow. Until then, you are under our protection. No harm will come to you." The warriors left as suddenly as they had arrived. Jake sat alone in his apartment, trying to process what had just happened. His hands shook as he poured another cup of coffee. The news channels were now reporting that the Veyrath fleet had made contact with the colonial government. They were requesting a formal meeting with a human named Jake Morrison. Reporters were scrambling to find out who he was and why an alien fleet wanted to talk to him. Jake's communicator exploded with messages. Friends he hadn't heard from in years were suddenly reaching out. News organizations were offering money for interviews. His employer sent 3 messages asking him to come in immediately. He ignored them all. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the small child, about her silver scales and frightened eyes. He had saved her without thinking, without considering the consequences. Now those consequences were arriving in the form of an alien fleet and a matriarch who commanded worlds. The next morning, official vehicles arrived at his building. Not military this time, but diplomatic transport. Jake was escorted to the colonial government headquarters, a massive building in the center of the capital city. The building was surrounded by security forces, both human and Veyrath. Inside, diplomats rushed back and forth, their faces tight with stress. Jake was taken to a large ceremonial hall. Hundreds of people filled the room. Government officials, military officers, news crews, and curious citizens all pressed together to witness whatever was about to happen. Jake felt very small and very underdressed in his simple clothes. Then the doors at the far end opened. High Matriarch Celera entered the hall, and everyone fell silent. She was taller than the other Veyrath, nearly 8 feet in height. Her scales were deep blue, almost black, and covered in intricate patterns that Jake realized were scars from old battles. She wore armor that looked both ancient and incredibly advanced. Her presence filled the room. Behind her walked a small figure. Nira, the child Jake had saved. She looked healthy and bright, her silver scales gleaming. When she saw Jake, her eyes widened and she pulled away from her attendant, running across the hall toward him. Celera let her go. The child grabbed Jake's hand and looked up at him with complete trust. Jake felt tears sting his eyes. The matriarch approached. Everyone watched as she stopped in front of Jake. Then, to the shock of everyone present, she knelt down. A Veyrath matriarch never knelt to outsiders. Never. "Jake Morrison," she said in a voice that carried through the silent hall. "You saved my daughter. You shed your blood for her. I am in your debt." The hall remained absolutely silent. Jake stood frozen as the most powerful Veyrath in this sector of space knelt before him. Her daughter still held his hand, squeezing it gently. "Please," Jake said quietly. "You don't need to do that." Celera rose gracefully to her feet. She was even more imposing standing at full height. Her amber eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right through him. "In my culture, we honor those who show true courage," she said. "You demonstrated Kelshera, the warrior's heart. You placed yourself between death and my child without hesitation. This is the highest virtue my people recognize." Jake glanced around at all the watching faces. Cameras were recording everything. This moment would be broadcast across human space and beyond. He felt deeply uncomfortable with all the attention. "I just did what anyone should do," he said. "But they do not," Celera replied. She gestured to the crowd. "Look around this room. Hundreds of people witnessed the attack. How many threw themselves into the line of fire to protect strangers? Only you." She was right, and Jake knew it. He had seen people running away from the danger, had seen security personnel hesitate before engaging the shooters. Only he had run toward the child. Celera placed her hand over her chest, a Veyrath gesture of sincerity. "You shed blood for my daughter. In doing so, you created a bond that my people hold sacred. The Kethera, the blood bond, ties your fate to House Celera. I come today to honor this bond and offer you recompense." "I don't want money," Jake said quickly. A slight smile crossed Celera's scaled face. "I know. Commander Velis reported that you said this. It makes what I offer more meaningful." She gestured, and an attendant brought forward a small chest. Celera opened it, revealing what looked like crystals that glowed with internal light. "This is concentrated wealth from 3 worlds," she said. "Enough to make you rich beyond human measure. Enough to buy estates, ships, influence. You need never work again. This is my first offer." Jake stared at the crystals. He had no idea what they were worth, but he believed her. It was more money than he could imagine. "My second offer," Celera continued, closing the chest, "is a position of honor in human space. With the backing of House Celera, you could become a diplomat, an official, a voice for cooperation between our peoples. You would have power and respect." She paused, watching his reaction. Jake felt overwhelmed. Either offer would change his entire life. "My third offer is different," Celera said, her voice taking on a different tone. "I offer you a place among my people. You would come to our homeworld. You would train as a warrior of House Celera. You would learn our ways, become part of our culture. This path is harder than the others, but it is the path of honor." The crowd erupted in whispered conversations. Humans were shocked. No human had ever been offered a place in Veyrath society like this. Jake looked down at Nira. The child smiled up at him, still holding his hand. She had been through something terrible, but here she was, trusting him completely. "Can I speak with her?" Jake asked, gesturing to Nira. Celera nodded. Jake knelt down, ignoring the pain in his leg. Nira moved closer to him. "Hi, Nira," he said softly. "Do you remember me?" She nodded vigorously. Then she said something in the Veyrath language that he didn't understand. Celera translated. "She says you are brave. She says you kept the bad noise away from her." Jake felt his throat tighten. "I'm glad you're safe." Nira reached out and touched the bandage visible under his shirt collar. Her expression became sad. She spoke again, and Celera translated. "She says she is sorry you were hurt protecting her. She wants you to come home with us so she can take care of you like you took care of her." That did it. Jake felt tears well up in his eyes. He had saved this child, and now she wanted to help him. It was the purest form of gratitude he had ever experienced. He looked up at Celera. "The third option. I choose to come with you." The crowd erupted in noise. Reporters shouted questions. Officials looked shocked. But Jake kept his eyes on Celera. The matriarch placed her hand on his shoulder, careful to avoid his injury. "You honor my house with this choice. I promise you, Jake Morrison, you will not regret it." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Jake was taken to a secure location where he was briefed on what would happen next. Human officials tried to talk him out of his decision. They worried about the precedent, about what it meant for human-Verath relations, about losing one of their citizens to an alien culture. Jake listened politely, but his mind was made up. He had little left on Earth. His security career was over. His family had died years ago. He had friends, but none close enough to make him stay. And there was something about the Verath honor and directness that appealed to him. Commander Velis came to see him that evening. The warrior brought food and sat down across from Jake. "You surprised me today," Velis said. "Most humans would have taken the wealth." "I've never cared much about money," Jake replied. And the diplomatic position sounded exhausting. Velis laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "The training will be harder than anything you have experienced. The matriarch has ordered me to oversee your instruction. I will push you to your limits and beyond." "I survived Marine basic training," Jake said. "I can handle hard work." "This will make your Marine training look easy," Velis warned. But there was respect in his eyes. "Still, you have the warrior's heart. That is more important than strength or speed. That can be taught. Courage cannot." They talked late into the night. Velis explained more about Verath culture, about their honor codes and their way of life. He warned Jake that he would face discrimination from some Verath who did not approve of humans. He would have to prove himself again and again. Jake listened and asked questions. The more he learned, the more certain he became that he had made the right choice. The next morning, he was taken to the spaceport. The same spaceport where the attack had happened. Walking through those gates brought back the memories, the sound of gunfire, the smell of blood, the weight of the child in his arms. But this time was different. This time, he walked toward a Verath shuttle with his head held high. Celera and Nira waited for him at the boarding ramp. A small crowd had gathered to watch. Some people called out support. Others looked confused or angry. Jake ignored them all. Nira ran to him and grabbed his hand again. She chattered in Verath, and Celera smiled. "She says she is happy you are coming home with us." "Home," Jake repeated. It was a strange word. He hadn't really had a home in years. Just apartments and barracks and temporary housing. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a real home among these aliens who valued honor and courage above all else. He climbed aboard the shuttle with Nira still holding his hand. The ramp closed behind them, sealing him off from the only world he had ever known. Through the viewport, Jake watched as the shuttle lifted off and climbed toward the waiting fleet. Below, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light among billions. Jake took a deep breath and let it out slowly. His old life was over. A new one was beginning. He had no idea what challenges waited for him on the Verath homeworld, but he knew one thing for certain. He had made his choice, and he would face whatever came next with the same courage he had shown at the spaceport. The warrior's heart that the Verath valued so highly would carry him through. The Verath homeworld of Kethros took Jake's breath away. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, he pressed his face against the viewport like a child. Vast oceans stretched in every direction, their waters a deep purple that seemed to glow from within. Massive fortress cities rose from the waves, built from materials that shifted color between blue and silver. "Beautiful, is it not?" Celera asked from beside him. "Kethros has been our home for 10,000 years. "I've never seen anything like it," Jake admitted. They landed at House Solara's main compound, a sprawling complex built into and around a mountain that jutted from the ocean. Waterfalls cascaded down its sides, and Jake could see training grounds, living quarters, and what looked like military installations carved into the rock itself. Hundreds of Verath waited to greet their matriarch. They all stopped and stared when Jake climbed out of the shuttle. A human on Kethros was practically unheard of. Jake felt every eye on him as he followed Celera through the compound. She took him to quarters that had been prepared for him. The room was large by human standards, but probably small for a Veyrath. It had a bed that had been modified for his size, a bathing area, and a window that looked out over the ocean. "Rest tonight," Celera said. "Tomorrow, your training begins with Commander Velis. It will not be easy." That was an understatement. Jake woke before dawn to find Velis waiting outside his door. The commander took him to a training ground where 30 other Veyrath warriors were already practicing combat drills. They all stopped to watch as the human approached. "This is Jake Morrison," Velis announced to the group. "He has been claimed by House Celera. He will train with you. I expect you to push him hard, but also to teach him well. He is one of us now." The warriors looked skeptical. Jake didn't blame them. He was smaller, weaker, and completely unfamiliar with their ways. He looked like he would break in the first hour. Velis started him with basic exercises: running, lifting, combat drills with wooden training weapons. Within 30 minutes, Jake was exhausted. His injured shoulder screamed in protest. His leg threatened to give out. Sweat poured down his face. "Again," Velis commanded. Jake gritted his teeth and went again. And again. And again. The other warriors watched with varying expressions. Some looked amused. Others looked disgusted that such a weak creature was training among them. A few looked curious. By midday, Jake could barely stand. Every muscle in his body burned. His injuries throbbed with pain that made him want to cry out. "Enough," Velis said finally. "Go eat. Return in 2 hours." Jake limped to the dining hall. The Veyrath food was strange but edible. He ate alone, too tired to care about the stares he received from other warriors. The afternoon training was even worse. Velis taught him the basics of Veyrath combat, a style that emphasized strength and precision. Jake was terrible at it. His body was too small, too slow, too human. He failed every drill. He couldn't match the speed of the Veyrath warriors. He couldn't generate the power they did. After being thrown to the ground for the 20th time, Jake lay there gasping for breath and wondering what he had gotten himself into. A shadow fell over him. One of the warriors, a female named Kira, looked down at him with cold amber eyes. "You do not belong here, human," she said in accented English. "You should return to your own kind before you embarrass House Celera further." Jake pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. "I'm not going anywhere." "Then you will fail," Kira said. "And when you do, everyone will know that humans are weak." She walked away, leaving Jake standing alone on the training ground. Other warriors muttered agreement with her assessment. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting emotional would not help him here. The next days blurred together in an endless cycle of training, pain, eating, and collapsing into bed. Jake woke up sore every morning and went to bed more sore every night. His body was pushed beyond anything he had experienced in the Marines. But slowly, very slowly, he improved. His body adapted to the harsh training. His injuries gradually healed with the help of Veyrath medicine. He learned to read the combat patterns of his opponents. He started to understand the honor code that governed every interaction between warriors. 3 weeks into his training, Jake managed to block one of Kira's attacks. She looked surprised, then annoyed. The next attack came faster, and Jake barely avoided it. But he had blocked one attack. That was progress. Velis noticed. "Better," the commander said. "You are learning." In the evenings, Nira would visit Jake's quarters. The child was learning English just as he was learning Veyrath language, and they would sit together practicing words and phrases. She told him about her day, about the things she was learning, about her friends. Those visits became the highlight of Jake's days. Nira's innocent joy reminded him why he had come here. She trusted him completely, and he would not let her down. One evening, Celera came with Nira. The matriarch sat down and watched as Jake and her daughter practiced their language lessons. "You are doing better than I expected," Celera said. "Velis reports that you have not quit despite the difficulties." "I don't quit," Jake said simply. "So I have seen. That is good. But training your body is only part of what you must learn. You must also understand our ways, our honor code, our culture." Over the following weeks, Jake spent time with Veyrath scholars who taught him the history and philosophy of their people. He learned about the concept of Kelshera, the warrior's heart, which was considered the highest virtue. He learned about family bonds, about honor debts, about the complex web of obligations that held Veyrath society together. It was fascinating and sometimes contradictory. The Veyrath valued individual combat prowess but also emphasized the importance of the group. They were fierce warriors but also had complex art and music traditions. They seemed brutal but were governed by strict codes of honor that prevented unnecessary cruelty. Jake found himself drawn to their way of thinking. There was a clarity to Veyrath culture that human society often lacked. Actions had consequences. Debts were repaid. Courage was honored above wealth or status. 2 months into his training, something changed. Jake was sparring with another warrior when he saw an opening. His body moved before his mind caught up, executing a perfect counter-strike that sent his opponent stumbling back. The training ground fell silent. Jake had just scored a clean hit on a full Veyrath warrior. Velis laughed, a booming sound that echoed across the compound. "Now you are learning." That night, several warriors approached Jake in the dining hall. They nodded to him with respect and invited him to sit with them. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. He was beginning to be accepted. Kira was not among them. She still looked at Jake with cold disapproval. But even her hostility seemed less intense than before. 3 months into his training, news arrived that shook the compound. A terrorist attack had occurred on another human colony. The same supremacist group that had attacked the spaceport was claiming responsibility. Jake felt sick. More innocent people dead because of hatred and fear. More families destroyed. More children traumatized. Celera called him to her private chambers that evening. Maps and tactical displays covered the walls, showing human space and Veyrath territory. "The terrorists are growing bolder," she said. "They have support from somewhere. Resources. Weapons. Intelligence. This is not just a small group of extremists." "What can be done?" Jake asked. Celera turned to face him. "I believe this is a test, Jake Morrison. A test of whether humans and Veyrath can truly work together. I want to create a joint task force to investigate these terrorists. And I want you to lead the human side of the operation." Jake stared at her. "Me? I'm still in training. I'm barely accepted by your warriors." "Exactly," Celera said. "You are human, but you understand our ways. You have the warrior's heart that both our peoples can respect. You are the perfect bridge between our cultures." Jake thought about the small child at the spaceport, about Nira's frightened eyes, about all the other innocents who had died or would die if the terrorists were not stopped. "I'll do it," he said. Celera smiled. "I knew you would. Commander Velis will lead the Veyrath team. Together, you will hunt these terrorists down and stop them before they start a war between our peoples." The joint task force assembled in a secure facility on the edge of House Solara's compound. Jake stood before a mixed group of human and Veyrath operatives, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The human team consisted of 5 former military personnel who had volunteered for the mission. They looked at Jake with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. He was younger than most of them and had no official rank or authority. The only reason they were following his lead was because the Veyrath demanded it. The Veyrath team included Commander Velis and 4 elite warriors. Kira was among them, her expression as cold as ever when she looked at Jake. "Our intelligence indicates the terrorist network is larger than we thought," Jake began, activating a holographic display. "They have cells on at least 6 human colonies and are receiving funding from somewhere. Our job is to infiltrate the organization and find out who is backing them." One of the human operatives, a woman named Lisa Carter, spoke up. "How do you plan to infiltrate? They'll recognize you from the spaceport incident." Jake had thought about this. "That's exactly why they won't suspect me. I'll play the disgruntled hero. A man who saved an alien child and got nothing but medical bills and a ruined career in return. A man who is starting to think the supremacists might have a point." Velis nodded approval. "It is a good plan. But dangerous. If they discover who you truly are, they will kill you." "I know," Jake said simply. The plan was put into motion over the following week. Jake returned to human space alone, leaving his Veyrath training behind. He let word spread that he was bitter about his treatment after the spaceport incident. He made complaints to officials. He posted angry messages on public forums about how aliens were given preferential treatment while humans suffered. It felt wrong to say those things, even as an act. But it worked. A man named Greg Peters contacted him 3 weeks after he started the operation. Peters claimed to be a recruiter for a human protection organization. Over drinks at a dingy bar on Theta 7, Peters carefully felt out Jake's sympathies. Jake played his part perfectly. He talked about his injuries, his lost career, his financial struggles. He expressed frustration with how the Veyrath seemed to get special treatment. He never went too far, never sounded crazy. Just bitter and disillusioned. Peters bought it. 2 weeks later, Jake was brought to a meeting with other recruits. They gathered in the basement of an abandoned warehouse, and a man named Cole Harrison addressed them. Harrison was the leader of the local cell. He was in his 40s, well-spoken, and genuinely believed in his cause. He talked about human sovereignty, about the threat of alien influence, about taking back control of their destiny. Jake listened and nodded along, all while memorizing faces and recording everything with a hidden device. Over the next month, Jake worked his way deeper into the organization. He attended meetings, participated in training exercises, and slowly gained their trust. All the while, he passed information to Velis through coded messages. What he discovered was worse than anyone had suspected. The terrorist network had connections inside the human colonial military. Officers who sympathized with their cause were providing weapons, intelligence, and protection. The supremacists were planning something big. Jake was in a warehouse checking supplies when he overheard 2 men talking. They mentioned a peace conference scheduled to happen in 3 weeks. Representatives from 6 different species would be gathering to discuss trade agreements and security cooperation. The terrorists were planning to attack it with a biological weapon. Thousands would die. The attack would destroy any hope of peaceful relations between humans and other species. It might even start a war. Jake sent an emergency message to Velis, then continued his work as if nothing had happened. His hands shook as he loaded crates onto a truck. One mistake now could doom everything. The next day, Cole Harrison pulled Jake aside. "We have a special job for you," Harrison said. "You're going to be part of the team that delivers our message to the aliens." Jake's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. "What do you need me to do?" Harrison explained the plan. A small team would infiltrate the conference center the day before the event. They would plant the weapon in the ventilation system. When the conference began, they would activate it remotely. "You're perfect for this," Harrison said. "You're a hero to some people. If anyone questions why you're at the conference center, you have a built-in excuse. You're the man who saved an alien child." The irony was not lost on Jake. 3 days before the attack, Jake managed to send detailed information to Velis. The location of the terrorist compound. The names of the conspirators. The plan for the conference. Everything. But his cover was compromised. Jake was in the warehouse when Harrison and 6 other men surrounded him. They had guns drawn. Harrison's face was twisted with rage. "We know who you are," Harrison spat. "One of our military contacts recognized you from surveillance footage. You've been working with the aliens." Jake's mind raced. He was outnumbered and outgunned. The warehouse was isolated. No one would hear if things went wrong. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, buying time. "Don't lie to me," Harrison shouted. He pulled out a tablet and showed Jake a picture. It showed Jake training with Veyrath warriors on Kethros. Someone had leaked it. "You're a traitor to your own species," one of the other men said. "You went native with the aliens." Jake stopped pretending. There was no point anymore. "I'm trying to prevent a massacre. You want to kill thousands of innocent people." "They're not innocent," Harrison said. "They're invaders. Threats. We're protecting humanity. By becoming murderers." Harrison raised his gun. "We're protecting our future. And you're not going to stop us." The warehouse door exploded inward. Velis and the Veyrath warriors stormed in with weapons firing. The terrorists scattered, returning fire. Jake dove behind a crate as bullets and energy blasts tore through the air. The fight was brutal and fast. The Veyrath warriors moved with incredible speed and precision. 2 terrorists went down in the first seconds. Harrison tried to run, but Velis caught him, slamming him to the ground. Jake saw one of the terrorists aiming at Velis's back. Without thinking, he threw himself forward, tackling the man before he could fire. They hit the ground hard, fighting for control of the weapon. The terrorist was stronger, pushing Jake back. The gun swung toward Jake's face. Then Kira was there, pulling the man off and disarming him with a swift strike. She looked down at Jake with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she offered him her hand and pulled him to his feet. "I was wrong about you, human," she said. "You have Kelshera." The warehouse was secured within minutes. The terrorists were captured alive. Human security forces arrived shortly after, along with Lisa and the other human operatives. The entire conspiracy was unraveling. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. The weapon was still out there, and the conference was in 2 days. They had to find it before the terrorists could activate it remotely. Interrogations revealed the location of the main compound where the weapon was being stored. It was in the mountains outside the capital city, a fortified position with over 30 armed men guarding it. Celera herself arrived to oversee the final assault. She brought additional warriors and coordinated with human military forces. Despite some resistance from colonial officers, the joint operation went forward. The attack happened at dawn. Human and Veyrath forces struck simultaneously from 3 directions. The terrorists fought back desperately, knowing they had nothing to lose. Jake was in the first wave with Velis and the Veyrath team. They moved through the compound with practiced efficiency, clearing rooms and neutralizing threats. Jake's training kicked in, his body moving on instinct. They reached the central building where the weapon was stored. A dozen terrorists made a last stand there, firing from behind barricades. Jake saw one of them reaching for a device that looked like a remote trigger. He didn't hesitate. Jake sprinted forward, ignoring the bullets that kicked up dirt around him. He was back at the spaceport again, running toward danger instead of away from it. Running to protect innocents. A bullet grazed his arm. Another hit his vest, knocking the wind out of him. But he reached the terrorist before the man could activate the trigger. They struggled, and Jake managed to knock the device away. Velis finished the fight, stunning the remaining terrorists with precise shots. Human demolition experts moved in to secure and safely dispose of the biological weapon. Jake sat on the ground, breathing hard, blood running down his arm from the graze wound. It was over. They had stopped the attack. Thousands of lives had been saved. Celera approached and looked down at him. "Once again, you threw yourself into danger to protect others. You continue to honor House Celera." Jake smiled weakly. "Just doing my job." "No," Velis said, joining them. "You did more than that. You proved that humans and Veyrath can fight side by side. You bridged 2 worlds." In the aftermath, the conspiracy was exposed. Military officers were arrested. The terrorist network was dismantled. The peace conference went ahead as planned, with even stronger security. Jake was formally adopted into House Celera in a ceremony attended by dignitaries from multiple species. It was the first time a human had been given such an honor. Standing before the assembled crowd with Nira holding his hand and Celera placing the mark of House Celera on his uniform, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like he belonged. Months later, Jake stood at a cultural exchange center that had been built as a symbol of human-Veyrath cooperation. Children from both species played together in the courtyard, laughing and chasing each other without concern for their differences. Nira was among them, teaching human children simple Veyrath words while they taught her their games. Celera joined Jake as he watched. "You changed the course of history," she said quietly. "That moment at the spaceport, when you threw yourself over my daughter. It started something neither of us could have predicted." "I just did what was right," Jake said. "That is precisely why it mattered. You saw a child in danger and acted without considering politics or species or consequences. That simple act of courage showed both our peoples what we could become together." Jake watched the children play, human and Veyrath side by side. He thought about how far he had come from that day at the spaceport. He had lost his old life but gained a new one. He had found a home among aliens who valued the same things he did: honor, courage, sacrifice for others. "What now?" he asked Celera. She smiled. "Now we continue building bridges. There are other species who need to see what we have achieved. And there will always be those who oppose cooperation. We must remain vigilant." Jake nodded. There would be more challenges ahead. More threats to peace. More people who needed protecting. But he was ready. He had the warrior's heart. And he had found his purpose. He was Jake Morrison of House Celera, and his story was just beginning.